الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين الصلاة والسلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا حبيب الله الصلاة والسلام عليك يا نبي الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا نور الله. Once again, we're here on Ilm City's platform. Ilm City, throughout the month of Ramadan, have been bringing us different podcasts on a variety of different topics. And alhamdulillah, we are here once again to discuss another pressing issue of our times. And with me, I have Hazrat Allama Maulana Imam Irfan Chishti Sahib, who needs an introduction. But before I introduce the topic and ask my first question to him, I'll give a brief introduction to his background. He holds a law degree from Manchester Metropolitan University. He also has traditional Islamic education from Jamia Al-Karam and Jamiat Al-Azhar in Cairo, Egypt. He comes from a scholarly family. He studied a master's in Islamic studies. He also has served as a secondary school teacher and head of department of religious education. And currently he runs and is the founder of Me and You, which is an organization that provides training in schools to staff and students on how to combat extremist ideologies. Imam Sahib, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. 1.5 minutes of introduction, Nadir Bhai, that was too long. And all of those titles that you gave me at the start, Allah bless you for your husnul dhan. I often say this to people, if people could just understand even just that word Maulana or Allama, you know, these are huge titles, and I am not deserving of in any way, shape, or form. Thank you for having me here. I was laughing before with my family that it's a different type of conversation today, and I'm very passionate about this subject actually. And so I'm really glad that you've asked me to talk on this, because you know, being Muslim and then kind of having a career that you're very keen and passionate on is something that inshallah we'll talk at length about that.
So you've introduced the topic for us already. So about being Muslim and climbing the career ladder. Often being Muslim and being in the workplace poses all sorts of challenges at times. And I think especially in our community, sometimes it is thought that you can't, it's hugely difficult to have both hand in hand. So I think the intention here today is to have a bit of a discussion about it, speak to somebody who has been successful in, you could say, a non-religious career path as well as the religious career path, and try to overcome any misconceptions that people might have. And as I said, I'll go straight into my first question with you. As I said, you come from a religious family background. You then pursued a cutthroat career in law as a lawyer, and then you came back to being, somebody, an imam, essentially. I mean, how does that happen? I mean, just to delve into your background a bit.
Well, I think to answer your question very simply at the end, how does it happen? It all happens through the grace of Allah and His qudra and qadr, really. My honourable father, alayhi rahmah, I suppose, was our huge. Not only was I a kind of spiritual religious guide, but a very loving and nurturing father. And the one thing that he would often say to us from the very beginning, I remember. So we're a family of 6 children, and 3 of us were born. Well, we were all born in Pakistan, but raised. 3 of us were younger siblings were raised here, and the elder ones were raised in Pakistan. The 3 elder. And when we arrived in England, when my father came back in '74, this is just a year after my birth. The most important thing from day one was education. And the value of education was instilled in us from the very beginning. And he often used to say, I don't care even if you just get to the doorway of the university, you've got to get to university. This was like at the age of 6 or 7, when we're just still in that kind of just out of nappies in nursery. So that was really the impetus. And just fast forwarding very quickly to your question, It was actually my honourable father again. They gave a bit of a graduation Thanksgiving, Izhar Tashakkur. I still have the card somewhere in my archives. And we had a Qawwali program with Chishti background, and he invited all, the great and the good of the town. 3 of us graduated consecutively over a couple of years, and I was the last one to graduate that year. It was 95, and just at the end of the gathering, we had a Qawwali session, some food and all the rest of it, Khatam Sharif, Zikr and all the rest, as we normally do. And right at the end, he said, just say a few words to thank the people for, in English, as you do. And so I stood up, and I didn't have anything prepared. It was just going to be a kind of vote of thanks, as we say. But something happened at that moment, and I looked at the crowd. I looked at all of these, I say, the great and the good of the town, and I said, you know what? I'm something so special and unique about our father that I'm so proud of, that I just want to share, and that is that all of you, and remember, I'm looking at kind of big rich businessmen, the typical lawyer, doctors, engineers, all that, everybody else in that community that was worth of note, and I said, all of you have come here for one reason, and I did that. You've come for this. Right, and you've come for your belly. Pet ke liye aaye hain, ya maal ke liye aaye hain. You came for the intention of bettering your worldly selves. Whereas my honourable father came to this country actually rejecting his offer to come, and there's a long story which I won't go into now. And he didn't want to come here, but he was encouraged and almost kind of forced to come from his mashayikh and his teachers. So he came for one purpose and one purpose alone, and that was to serve the deen. And so that was it. I just in your introduction, you said about kind of being a cutthroat lawyer. I was intending to do that, and I paid remember my after graduation that year. So we're talking about the summer of '95. I paid, and I still remember, £200 is a lot of money even now, and in those days it was as well for a young student. I'd paid £200 deposit for my what they call the LPC legal practice course at Sheffield University, which is where I grew up, and so I was really keen to get back home to Sheffield, having spent a few years away. I said to Abaji at the end of that gathering, I just said, so in that talk, I said it would be a real shame if none of his children took up his legacy. And so after the talk, I said to Abaji, I said, look, I'll give you a year. So I still had this intention that I want to carry on and pursue my career, but I'll take a year out, and I'll go and do some Arabic, and you can send me wherever you want for a bit. That 1 year became 6-7 years of study, and I never went back to the career. So what I did do in terms of career, though, I did then do my last degree was a postgrad in education. So I did the PGC and became an RE teacher, and then kind of combined the teaching. We'll come on to this later on in terms of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his teachings. But that was essentially the story. I'm in touch with some of my friends who graduated with me in that year, and they're all, mashallah, very successful lawyers and all the rest. And they now look at me and say, you know what? You've done alhamdulillah, some amazing things, and it's not the other way around. I don't miss the fact that I've missed that career in a sense, because Allah Ta'ala, alhamdulillah, has blessed me with many opportunities since that time. And had I not jumped ship, if you like, and gone on to a different career path, and gone into pursuing education Islamically and a secular education, then I wouldn't be sat here today in front of you. Sorry, the internet connection is very poor.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Sorry, the Dubai internet connection isn't the greatest at the moment, it seems.
Okay, I'm not sure how much of that you got.
I got everything. I was actually about to start my next question to you.
Okay, go for it. Bismillah.
So I was just asking you that obviously your career has taken many twists and turns along the path, and obviously you made different choices for yourself. But in terms of the career choices that others may make, what sort of advice would you give to them?
Brilliant question. So I think the first thing I'd start off with saying is that as human beings, as insan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed each and every single one of us uniquely and differently. And sometimes we don't, I remember as a child, with my reports, often you would have heard this yourself, people, teachers write, we hope that you achieve your potential. And that potential is something that sometimes we don't actually realize what it is that we have within ourselves innately that we can then excel in that particular field. So I think the first thing that I'd say, and again, this is advice to people who are, already in perhaps careers and jobs, or young people who are kind of starting out, people maybe at university and the like, or even younger children. So I think the first thing that you really need to kind of find out about yourself is actually what are those God-given qualities and traits that are unique to you and that you will excel in. So there is what we call a taba'a that you have, and it's sometimes people just don't even look within themselves. There are various ways of assessing different types of kind of personality traits. Is something that's quite big in professional culture, certainly in leadership, and those kind of assessments are helpful. I've had that done, and I've done to myself. I've done it with colleagues as well, and it does help you to kind of figure out about your own mindset. So that's the first thing I'd say is kind of like trying to figure out who you are and what you're good at and what your passions are. And then in terms of the challenges, and we've got another question here around kind of parents and stuff, and so I'll answer the two together, which is that some parents do have a very closed mindset in terms of what is and what is a viable and a kind of a so-called kind of respectable career, if you like. For that, I'd say that look, again, not everyone's made in exactly the same way. People are different. And I want to share here with people the definition of a word, the word dhulm. Okay, dhulm in Arabic is, or translated even in Urdu, is about kind of being really harsh. And tyranny is a word that we use to translate it literally. It's about injustice and about being, doing somebody else wrong. Okay, but the technical definition of dhulm is wad'u shay'i fi ghayri mahallihi. So putting someone where they don't belong, or putting something where it doesn't belong. And so, I'd say to parents as well who are pressurizing young children that, again, go back to what of your child is kind of what are his likes, dislikes, or their dislikes. What are the qualities that they have that perhaps others of your children. And as a father, as a parent, I've got 4 girls and a son, and I know that each one of them is unique and different. So it is about trying to figure out what those qualities are, and then adapting to that. WhatsApp is awash with loads of messages, and there's something that just came through today actually that's very relevant to this answer, and that is about Ottomans. And apparently they had on the madrasa walls, here no fish will be forced to fly and no bird will be forced to swim. So it kind of fits in with what I said at the start there, that everyone has a natural disposition, and yes, there are certain skills that you can improve on, you can learn. But generally speaking, we do have what I said at the beginning, a natural taba'a. So that's certainly what I'd encourage. And then there are a plethora of different careers out there. I remember when I finished my A-levels, my A-level literature teacher, she came up to me and she said, "So, congratulations, So no, she said commiserations. What do you mean commiserations? I'm over the moon. I got a B, and that, that's a big thing for her. I was the only Pakistani in the literature class, and she said, no, commiserations. You didn't get the A. And then she said, oh, by the way, what are you doing at uni? And I said, I'm doing law. And she said, oh, all of that creativity and all of that passion for literature is all going to dry up. And she said, why don't you do English? And you know what? I honestly, genuinely, this is me at 17 years old, just in my A-levels. I genuinely turned around and said to her, I said, Miss, I didn't even know you could do an English degree. And that's how, again, the mentality sometimes of the people that we are surrounded with, that we limit ourselves into kind of certain fields. So, take it from me. Go with your passions, go with your experiences, go with what you know you're good at and you enjoy, and then excel, inshallah.
Jazakallah. Just moving towards the Islamic perspective on careers. What does Islam say about earning a living and pursuing a career?
So there's a wealth of what I would call kind of financial business work ethics that the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ, have implored us to uphold. And I think at the core of it, in terms of our responsibilities, it's you said in your introduction, it's kind of like balance between the worldly and the heavenly, if you like, and the outer world. I think one thing that I missed to say, and I'll tie this into your question here, is that knowledge from an Islamic perspective is defined as ma yuntafa'u bihi, that which gives benefit. All right. So this demarcation that we've kind of put as worldly and non-worldly, it's a bit false, really, because any kind of knowledge, as long as it is giving benefit to others, is by definition praiseworthy. Okay, so that's kind of one thing that I wanted to say. And then in terms of your direct question there, what does Islam say about kind of pursuing? I think that word in itself, again, it's loaded, and it also kind of indicates where sometimes some people are when it comes to careers, that they feel that this is a trajectory that they've got to go on to. It is an ultimate goal in life. It is something that we're just going to continue. We're going to just excel. And it's all about, accumulation of wealth. It's about accumulation of status. It's about those around them. And essentially, that's what pursuing a career means in terms of, the kind of Western model that we have of democracy and also of this kind of capitalist society that we're living in. We've got to balance all of that and the values that all that brings to what our Islam says about what we are and what we need to be doing to excel and to be successful, and what does success mean in terms of Islam. And so, what we've got to look at here is that essentially when it's about wealth accumulation, the purpose of that wealth is what? That first and foremost, if you are a family person, then the purpose of that wealth is to provide a livelihood and provide a halal means of sustenance for your family. If you haven't got to that stage there, then again, you will have other financial obligations, be they parents, be they siblings, perhaps. I was studying for a long time, and some of my elder brothers' siblings, they supported me throughout that time. So, pursuing a career per se, Islamically, is in no way, shape, or form a problem. The problem occurs when we lose our kind of compass point and focal point, and forget that the whole, what is the actual purpose of accumulating all of this wealth? And so, just a few those financial ethics that I spoke about before. I think the most important one is about being just and about being fair. All right. There's a beautiful Quran verse in Surah Al-Nisa that talks about don't be eating up wealth, don't be eating up your property and wealth in vainly, but let there be amongst you traffic and trade. Okay, let there be this mutual, this trade and this exchange and mutual goodwill. All right. And then the verse finishes off, about kind of don't be destroying yourselves. All right. Then there's another one here that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's advice, actually, and he says that there's going to be a time when a time will come upon the people when one will not care about how you gain your money, right? Whether that's illegal or illegal, whether it's halal or haram. And that's, again, one of the fundamental kind of, in terms of financial ethics of wealth accumulation. It is fundamentally to ensure that whatever practice that you engage in, whatever method of accumulating that wealth you engage in, you are going to be doing that in a legally lawful halal manner. I know you've had technical issues, but I've answered your question. If you come to the next one, hopefully the recording will pick up the answers, inshallah.
I could definitely hear you. It's just my video is having issues.
Oh, okay, Bismillah.
So my next question is just building on what you just said. Are there any particular examples of any prophets or any pious predecessors that had any successful careers?
Absolutely. I mean, just a quick search. There's I was surprised myself, actually. I have a whole list of here. I'm not going to have time to go through all of them, but if you look back to some of the prophets, those that are mentioned and not mentioned in the Quran, but there's a real variety of skill sets there, away from again. So if we have this phrase day job, every single prophet's day job was to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then they needed some form of another form of day job, which was going to give them sustenance for their families and what we were talking about before, to enable for them to fulfill their responsibilities. So right, starting from Adam alayhi salam all the way to our noble Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, if I say to you, I might do it like this, actually. If I say to you that we've got an agricultural engineer, we've got a weaver, we've got someone who was established tailoring, okay? Sayyidina Idris alayhi salam, he was actually the first to invent the needle. And the one who was, so you get a piece of metal there, but then having a hole at the end of it, all right, and to be able to thread it. So that was the foundation of modern day, tailoring, sewing. Or think of everything that what we've done with the needle, all right. Sheeth alayhi salam, right, weaving, okay. Nuh alayhi salam, of course, everyone who doesn't know about Noah's Ark. So the art of carpentry and shipbuilding, that started with him. Ibrahim alayhi salam constructing the Kaaba, so we can say he was a builder of sorts, okay, an architect. Lut alayhi salam, actually, a historian. Yusuf alayhi salam, amazing. I do a daily Quran reflections, and I remember when we were at Surah Yusuf, it's a beautiful verse that talks about how he actually presented to the Pharaoh there his own skills and said, look, I can help you with this. I can help you with this kind of administration of the yield. Again, the story is too long to go into, but he was appointed effectively by the ruler of the time as the head of the treasury. But also he was responsible for all of the agricultural intake that they produced, and also then the distribution of it. So he's a huge administrator and civil servant, if you want to use that phrase, in modern day government. Sayyidina Dawood alayhi salam, very well known for forging steel. So steel making and in making armor, that was something that he did. Sulaiman alayhi salam was, of course, famous for his rule, and then also actually was something quite interesting. He used to make baskets from rushes. And then we come to our noble master Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many of the other previous prophets that I've not mentioned also had the same trait, the same kind of job, if you like, that the Prophet ﷺ did, which is one of herding, right, cattle and sheep. So shepherds, there were many ways. Of course, Isa alayhi salam very famous for that as well. But the Prophet ﷺ, although he did that as a child, and then he, of course, later on we'll talk about Sayyidah Khadija as well in terms of business. He was a business trader, but fundamentally bu'ithtu mu'alliman, right? بُعِثْتُ مُعَلِّمًا. And this is something that, inshallah, I hope we're going to talk about a little bit more later, in terms of careers which are needed for Muslims. But he was fundamentally a teacher and a preacher, and that's something that again, I'm very, very passionate on. So those are just some examples from the prophets, and I hope you can see from that there's it's a whole array of different occupations. And I should have mentioned this hadith as well, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Khairul amal amalul yad." The best of all actions, the best of all work and occupations, in that sense, of careers. And that the word amal means good deeds as well, but action here in terms of work. And so he said the best of work, the best of occupations, if you want to do it, or the best of careers, is that which involves your hands. And you're sat there on your desk. I'm sure you've got your laptop there. I've got my laptop here in front of me. We use our fingers. That's using our hands, right? Of course, it can also mean physical, more physical things, using your entire hand to do more physical labor. But I often say to people, amal al yad is actually now more amal al asabi'. So those are just some of the examples. I hope it's given us something to think about. That our prophets were all great preachers of Allah's message. I forgot actually one here that I've just got on my list is Luqman al-Islam and his hikam, and the fact that he was well gifted with knowledge of medicine and of different medicines that would heal in different ways.
But Imam Sahib, pretty much all the examples you mentioned are men. Does that mean that women can't pursue careers?
That's the next question. Nice one. Good link. So women and careers, this is something that, for some people it's very sore and difficult. And I'm just going to be very pragmatic about it and say that, my Ustad Qibla Pizal Sahib often would use this example that a household, think of it as like a mini state, and you're always going to have a head of state, and then you're going to have a head of Ministry of Affairs. It needs to go on with all these different ministerial roles that the families could have for family members. So, you do have the traditional role of a household is to have a head of state, a traditional bread earner, if you like. And then the wife's role, the woman's role, is traditionally, again, to stay at home. And that is more and more, if you like, career women that you hear of will talk about their career as a mother as being the most difficult and pressing and most demanding job that they've ever done. And so I just wanted to start off with that outset that we have that traditional model. But I mentioned her already, Sayyidatuna Khadija al-Kubra, an immense support for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we know this from Sirah later on in many occasions when there was some kind of internal jealousy amongst the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. And if ever her name was mentioned, so that Aisha in particular would be quite, sometimes express certain words. So the Prophet ﷺ would effectively tell her off and say, don't ever mention anything about her. She was my greatest support when there was no support. And that support was not just, it wasn't just the moral support. It wasn't just the fact that she accepted Islam from the very beginning, the first person to accept Islam after Wahi, as we know, but also the financial support that she gave. Whenever there was a situation where the wealth was required for the Muslim Ummah and for Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam himself, she would be there foremost. So, and where would she be able to support him if she didn't have that wealth? And she was known as a very wealthy and very successful business lady, And so that's the probably the greatest example that we have. And there are many others. Scholars, one of our sisters here in our local town has just started an initiative, a brilliant initiative called the Fihri Institute. And that's about encouraging young women, Muslim women in particular, to come forward and to excel in education, because Sayyida Fatima al-Fihri, as we know, was the one who established the Al-Qarawiyyin University in Morocco. And again, there's this tussle between the historians about whether it was Al-Azhar first or Qarawiyyin. But either way, she was a very astute a very able and a very knowledgeable scholar who, as I say, established this grand masjid and grand university in Qayrawiyyin. So teaching and business, we have lots of examples from our early predecessors there. I just focused on the prophets there because I just was fascinated with the list. There was a huge list of very different trades. But to answer your question succinctly there at the end again, women can pursue careers, but there's lots of, I would say, serious consultation with your household that need to take place beforehand in terms of the choice of career that you would undertake.
Yeah. Imam Sahib, we have quite a few practical questions, actual practical requiring practical answers from some of these questions, and I'd encourage our viewers to actually continue sending these questions in. But before I move on to those questions, just thinking of it at a more macro level, why is it important for Muslims to do well in their careers? And just generally, what benefit is there for the Ummah at large for Muslims to be doing well in their careers and be in successful positions, let's say?
So again, we've touched on what does success mean. I'm not going to go over that again, but in terms of how people view us, I think that's where I'd like to answer that question from that viewpoint. I still teach in my my job at the moment. I get to speak to lots of children all across the country, and when we're doing the interfaith sessions in particular, I always say to them, just give us I have this thing, Google search image of Muslims, and it's just very bad. Okay, so why do we need to have good quality examples, role models that we can point at, that we can see and we can show in different society, in different areas? I think the first thing is because, generally speaking, Islam and Muslims, and you talked about the Ummah from a macro perspective, it's sad to say this, but generally speaking, we are seen as in a negative light. I'm not going to go down all the horrible stereotypes that are out there, but sadly they are. And so, when people excel in their own careers, it immediately counters all of that negativity. I hate talking about myself, I really do, but I'm just going to give you one quick example. One of my first jobs, I landed at a school not so far away here in my own hometown. I wasn't a senior leader or anything. I got to senior leadership quite later on, but this gentleman, he was quite hateful towards Muslims. He was a Catholic teacher, and he used to hate Muslims, right? And I'm not exaggerating. He used to hate Muslims. And the reason why he hated Muslims is because he spent all of his time online, most of it anyway, watching and seeing about how Muslims had done certain atrocities into Christian minorities in certain countries. So when I came along, bid and all the rest of it into this new job, he ended up being my line manager, and he was quite negative. He said something quite horrible at the start, and I took it on my chin. We carried on. A year or so later, after we'd developed this relationship, now he got to know me, and I did what I did at the school, and alhamdulillah, to the best of my capacity. He said, "You're too nice to be a Muslim." That was his words. You're too nice to be a Muslim. So what does it do? Is kind of like, he's still got this prejudice somewhere up there, but my akhlaq, I hope, my good dealings, my professionalism, everything that I'd done in my job there, face to face, that he had access to and see me in all of my interactions, meant that his hatred was suddenly, was wiped. So that's one of the fundamental reasons why. I'm going to turn to one other person, and this is really significant, and I learnt this a few years back from my, again, Honorable Sheikh. I've already mentioned him before, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Hussain Bizada. He wrote a tafsir in Nadul Karam, which I've been going through this Ramadan. And under the chapter, under the verse around the debate, Surah Al-Baqarah, this is the debate between the angels and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm still sticking with your question, Nadir Bhai. He talks about the importance of knowledge, okay? That the angels were, Adam alayhi salam was given knowledge and the angels weren't. And the phrase that he uses was, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. That, under that verse, and he taught Adam the name of all things. He says essentially what this is, what is it to name something? The process of naming something that you don't know the name of before is essentially what science does, material science, right? Through research, through experimentation, different things are worked out, and you might have a new invention, and suddenly you've put a name to something that you didn't have before. So he said essentially we're just talking about science, right? And then he gives us a phenomenal example, and I hope people can take this down. And I don't know if you can write on this and give it to the viewers. But Chaim Weizmann. Weizmann is spelled Weizmann. Okay, Google that person's name, put it into Wikipedia, Chaim Weizmann, and it will tell you that he was the first Israeli prime minister. But you know what else it will tell you? If you look down the long list, it will tell you that he was a scientist, and he was a lecturer at Manchester University. And while he was studying and he was doing his science, he discovered, right, something called, and I'm not a scientist, I've got to read these names properly. He discovered, he was known as the father of industrial fermentation. He used bacterium Clostridium, right, and then it produced acetone. Now with that, wait for it, right? What happens later with this acetone? It then becomes it becomes used. It is used to manufacture certain gases and certain products which are used in warfare. And who then used it in World War I? Yeah, Prime Minister Churchill. Okay, and long story short, that Mr. Weizmann became the first prime minister. The Balfour Treaty. I don't want to go into another debate and a whole discussion around Israel and Palestine, but suffice to say, the reason why I mention his name is because he was a scientist and he used his God-given talent and his knowledge to do something to benefit his own people. That was your question. Why is it important that we as Muslims excel in our careers so that we can do something not only to benefit ourselves, but to benefit the wider community?
Absolutely. And Imam Sahib, in your view, are there any particular fields or careers that you think that we as Muslims are lacking in?
Well, I think that one that I've just mentioned there, science, is certainly, although we have probably too many doctors and lawyers and all the rest of it, the traditional careers, but scientific research is certainly one. Again, going back to what the Sheikh was saying about knowledge, is that the Ummah is when it comes to the technology and things, that those are the things that excel and what people need. Right now, we're still in this COVID lockdown. The whole world is crying out for some kind of dawa for this. The da is there, and we know the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reveals and sends the dawa, and he also sends the da. And so finding cures for these difficult illnesses, these are definitely areas. But I'm not just saying this from my own background, but one of the things you wasn't in the introduction, and again, I'm not saying this because of any kind of pride, but just as a form of hopefully encouragement to others. I got onto senior management in my last school in 2010, 2012, I think it was. Yeah, I was the only in the town that I was in. So I was a secondary senior head teacher, assistant principal, and in that year, from my knowledge, because we used to have network meetings with other teachers and other head teachers and assistant heads, I was the only Muslim on a senior management position. So I think in terms of areas where I've seen and experienced there's lack, certainly teaching. There's lots of teachers, alhamdulillah, now in the profession, but at senior leadership, where decisions and policy and all of this is made, very, very few still. Media, how many times do we bang on about how biased the media is? All right, how biased the media is. How many, if I was to ask you right now, actually, your people who are watching, how many high-profile media people can we name on our hands, right? Who are Muslim and openly Muslim, right? We've got what? Go for it. It's difficult. Yeah, we have got some. but it's difficult. And then the ones that we do have, people say, well, they're not Muslim enough, you know. So media, if we're saying that media is biased, if we're saying that media is problematic, then be there, get to the media, right? And another one I put down here is actually marketing, because you know, I often say this about the way that we give da'wah. We have the most pristine, the most beautiful, the best product in the world, and that is Islam. But sadly, what I said at the start before is that that product isn't being marketed in a beautiful enough way that shows people the essence of it, the beauty of it, that they can then be attracted to. We're living in that, you know, catch them in the moment world. And so that's another area which I think definitely could do with some real creativity.
I'd agree with you with especially the media point. I mean, it's something that we always bang on about. But I mean, what actual practical steps are we taking to, you know, address those issues? And the reality of it is that very little. Next question to you is balancing our careers with our religious obligations. Obviously, it can be done, but how do we do it?
You know, that one I think is, I'd answer it quite simply just by saying that it really is about what's in your heart. Okay. One of my ustads gave this beautiful example, alayhi rahma, Dr. Bashir Ahmed Sadiqi sir. He used to talk a lot. He was from Lahore and he was passionate about Data Ali Hajwari. And he gave this example once. I remember he had the ability to have kashf, where see into people's hearts, again, God-given quality. And he said, I was I was doing tawaf around the Kaaba. I was doing tawaf around the Kaaba, and I looked into the person next to me, outwardly looking very religious in his attire and his manner. And I looked into his heart, and I saw that he was basically doing some accounts, right? He wasn't focusing on Allah. He was worried about his business. He was, thinking about the, income and expenditure, spreadsheet. Okay. And then he said he went into the bazaar, the same sheikh, and he saw a jeweler, engaged in the business of selling jewelry, and he looked into his heart, and he was doing the tawaf of the Kaaba. So, essentially, you balancing your obligations, your career, the two should never clash, right? So long as your heart is clear, your sense of responsibility is clear, and sincerity is there, I don't think that there should ever be a clash. Sometimes there are some practical, there's been one that has been a real piece of, kind of traumatic thing for some people about hospital medics and, healthcare workers with the beard. That's a religious obligation that Muslim men who wear beards, were told in certain circumstances that they have to shave. Those kind of extenuating, and hopefully those are not, regular cases like that. Each and every single one of those difficult circumstances have to be taken into, into account individually, and dealt with. But generally speaking, I think if we keep our perspectives balanced, then I don't think there's a clash. There's always a way out, I've found, and I suppose that's what I want to close on now. There is always a way out for achieving that. The Quran talks about the deen as being a deen of balance, a deen of mizan. And so the problem is that we sometimes don't know where those perspectives can balance.
So you mentioned about the beard, and that reminds me of one particular experience that I had, if I may share with you as well. Often this idea that there's a clash is something that's in our minds. And even if we have non-Muslim employers, in my experience at least, there isn't a clash in their minds. I reflect back onto one of the first ever job interviews I had for a Big Four firm, a Big Four accounting firm. And it was the final interview with the partner. The interview was going, well, and the final question he asked me, if you don't, and this was part of the interview, if you don't mind me asking, why do you have a beard? And I very simply said to him that it's because my deen, my religion tells me this is something that a man should keep. And he goes, very good answer. That's what I wanted to hear. Because I've asked this question to 3 other people in the past, and I know very well why they keep beards. I'm not a fool, but they gave me reasons such as, oh, I'm doing it for Movember, or I'm doing it as a fashion statement. But
they're
what I was
fearful.
but he said, what I was looking for was for you to be strong in your convictions and tell me why. Because as an auditor,
honesty. Yes.
Yeah, as an auditor, as an accountant, you need ethics and you need honesty.
Brilliant.
And I think just for anyone who's thinking that there is a clash between your religious obligations and your careers, I think that experience at least told me that there isn't.
Absolutely. No, I think you said it beautifully at the start. It is often, as I say, it's there. And so that's why I was talking about kind of your own heart and your own sincerity. So, if you can balance that within yourself, then inshallah there isn't a problem. It's a beautiful example, though. Exactly. I was going to say about, I think I mentioned it when I did the kind of general Islamic guidance on ethics. Every good employer wants what? What does an employer want out of an employee? The fundamental thing is honesty and truth, right? And that's the core of our faith. And so if we can adopt that in every practice that we do, then there really isn't any clash.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just a few final questions. These are the practical questions that we've had sent in. So if we could have some quick fire answers for them as well.
Bismillah. I'll try my best.
Somebody's asking, I don't have enough time in my lunch break for Zohar or Jummah. What can I do?
What does that mean, I don't have enough time? How much time do you need? Right? I think, if we're going to be practical about it, be really practical about it, right? We know even within our, if you've done your basic fiqh, you know that there are shortcuts that you can do within even your wudu, right? And even if you wanted to really shorten your zohar, there are ways of making that short. So this thing about I don't have enough time, it just sounds to me a really big excuse. Again, I'd lean on your example that you gave within your own employers that every employer, whether it's private sector, public sector, there is a legal obligation, health and safety requirement for there to be set times for breaks. Okay, so that doesn't hold water at all. All right, and examples of where some people have come to me and said, employers don't let us do it, or don't find us a room, or don't. We don't want to. Why establish a masjid with a mimbar and a mihrab in an office box? You don't need that. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that the entire earth is a masjid for you. So don't get hung up about stuff like this. Go for your basics when it comes to if there is a real issue with time spans. I know even teachers who've said that negotiated timetables where they've had like a period 5 after lunch, that's off so that they can go and nip out into the community and pray Jummah there if they haven't got the facility in the school or whatever. But it goes back to, I think I'd say I'll put it here in my notes that you've got to be, just as you gave in your example, you've got to be open and honest from the very beginning that these are the things that I need at that moment when you're in the interview. And certainly if you're getting to the top level and you're getting to the final level of your interview stages, then that they want you more than more than anything else. So that's your time to negotiate. And I'm going to finish with this. If it is an absolute worst case scenario where there really isn't any circumstance where you can pray your Zohar, then the deen again is full of solutions, and there's always the qada. But the qada is only there if there is no absolute way that you can offer your prayer on time.
Jazakallah. Next question is, often socializing at work is centered around parties and alcohol. How can I socialize with my colleagues? How can I avoid the social stigma of not attending these sort of events?
Yeah, that's it's a really difficult one. That I've been through that myself, to be honest, in my teaching career. But I think people are generally understanding. I think there are, again, different careers in different ways, different social norms about careers, and socializing itself will be different. So without giving any specifics, I think the general thing again is you've got to just be really, really open and honest, I think, and try to educate people. I've had conversations about, well, why do you need to have alcohol there to socialize? Can you not feel uninhibited to say what you want to say and to be social without having the alcohol? We know very clearly that there are very strict guidance in terms of being around alcohol. So you do have to explain that to people. When I've had that conversation, it's been quite surprising for some, that they've had an education. It's something you said before about it's often in people's heads. You don't know what the other person is thinking until you've had that conversation. And I'm not trying to. I'm not naive about this. I do know. We are very. I'm very aware of the fact that certain decisions do get made out of the office, as it were, and in the social domain. But I think for that, what I'd say is that, remember one of my my Ustad, that's Sheikh Karim Shah Sahib rahmatullah ta'ala, I'll quote here, and he used to say that, look, you need to be whatever position that you're in, whatever job that you go to, whatever career that you have. He used the phrase us jaga ki zarurat ban jao, become indispensable to that place. And so if you're going into socializing with your work colleagues because you think if you don't socialize, you're going to become less popular, you won't get a chance of promotion, all the rest of it, well, that's a fallacy, right? That really is a fallacy, and that is something in your head. Because if you present yourself, your work ethic is such an amazing, you do it in such an amazing way, you become such an amazing person, you become indispensable to that organization, then no amount of partying and socializing and all the rest of it is going to help you in that regard. So stick to your ethics. Don't dilute yourself. Don't worry about what other people are thinking and all the rest of it. And just be the better person, and you will realize that people will respect you for that. More and more people are kind of choosing these kind of teetotal lifestyles, of course, kind of, I was going to say other lifestyle choices that people have, and they want to do things differently. I've found that people who are kind of a little bit more cultured, if you like, and a bit more aware, they don't want to go down for the kind of, let's get down to the pub and get off and whatever and all the rest of it. There are other ways of socializing, a lot more other different ways than just that traditional alcohol and parties.
Yeah, I think a large part of it is the fact that Muslims in the UK at least are not new. We've been there for a while now.
Yeah.
So non-Muslims as well are largely familiar with our religion and some of the practical aspects of it. So if we were to ask for these certain things or have these sort of conversations, as you said, they shouldn't really come as a surprise. And there's so many sort of diversity programs and things taking place that different people, different opinions, which I guess we as Muslims are part of, are generally accepted more and more. That takes me to my next question. What factors should be considered when engaging with colleagues of the opposite gender?
It's a really, really important question. I think the most important thing here is your conduct, okay? And the way that you carry yourself, the way that you are, engaging on a work level is engaging on a work level. And we're all human beings. We carry non-verbal communications, perhaps much more than verbal communication. And sometimes things can be said and done without being said and done. And, we need to be exceptionally careful when it comes to how we carry ourselves, as I say, when we're with colleagues of the opposite gender. One of the most important safeguards, and we talk about safeguarding a lot in education, is the amazing hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And this answers directly the thing about engagement. What does that mean? Try your utmost. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said that when there's two people present, there's always going to be that third shaitan there. So, whatever situation that you're in within your workplace, then حتى الإمكان, as they say, as long as much as you can, as much as that is possible, trying to make sure that you're never in that khalwa sahiha, as they say in the fiqh, which is a personal private space. Because once you're in that personal private space, then the shaitan will be there, and there will be things happen and thought and said and done that are totally inappropriate. And so that's absolutely rule number one when it comes to the opposite gender. Other than that, people say to me that well, I have this platonic relationship, I have a professional relationship, and I don't see that person in that way, and I'm not. And to those people, again, I'd say, look, well, you need to realize that you're a human being, and the Prophet ﷺ's phrase and words can never be wrong. So as much as you might think that I've got this platonic relationship, well, again, just keep that safeguard in mind. All right. And one of the things that are complained about a lot still within the workplace environment is harassment of men. To women, harassment from men to women, and so that's something that actually we perhaps sometimes forget as menfolk, that we've got our responsibility. It goes back to what I said before about how you carry yourself, and sometimes it's very easy. I've had cases I've known of where people have been harassed, and they've been very, very traumatized by it, but they've kept things quiet because of actually livelihoods, and that's a really serious situation where people are being bullied and they've been harassed physically and sexually sometimes, but the victim in that circumstance sadly has not been able to say anything because of the force of the force of the situation, but more importantly because of the fact that they're worried about their livelihood. So it's a two-way situation there, that we as menfolk, especially if we're in leadership authorities positions, we need to be exceptionally careful about how we're engaging. But if we're if it's not in a superior position, if we're just colleagues amongst each other, then those safeguards have to be upheld all the time, because so many as an imam, I get to hear sadly of marriage breakdowns and reconciliation and all of that. And sadly, a lot of that has happened when somebody in the workplace has started a relationship and all the rest of it, and it's just really, really sad. But the safeguards are there, and we need to uphold them.
Yeah, absolutely. Imam, some final question to you before I ask you to do dua. So somebody has listened to this podcast and taken Imam Irfan Chishti's advice completely, has progressed through the career ladder well, and is earning more. How does he make sure that he maintains his spirituality, even though he's now earning more?
Beautiful question. We have some amazing examples of the Sahaba, the companions, pious awliya and ulama, who have equally excelled, phenomenally in terms of their wealth. But what has kept them grounded, what has kept them, I think Jalaluddin Rumi's somebody gave me an example, an explanation once of the whirling dervish. They have their feet pinned to the ground and they have their hand up into the air. Well, that's the way that we need to be, firmly pinned onto the ground, knowing that the qadr, knowing that the rizq, knowing that the fruits are all coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So long as we have that mentality that this is not my doing, right? Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal, it is whatever state that we're in, whether we're richer or poorer, it is all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing. You do your bit and leave the rest to Him. Your spirituality will grow if you have that mentality, if you have that thought that every single penny that you earn and every single pound that comes into your income has come through the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then so long as you're constantly thanking Him for that, and the Quran says very clearly, وَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you're grateful to those blessings, then you will increase more and more and more. I think what a great way to end it, Imam Sahib. Jazakallah khair for taking the time out to speak with us and having this discussion with us. As I said at the beginning, it's a very important topic, which is, I think, very rarely addressed
in our Muslim Islamic circles. So Jazakallah khair for taking the time and sharing with us your experiences and your pearls of wisdom. Just before we close, may I ask you to just do a final dua, and then we'll wrap up.
جزاك الله. آمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصلي عليه. Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ya Rauf Rahim, Ya Kareem, Ya Hannan. Ya Allah, we thank you for this opportunity that we've had here this evening to share some thoughts and to reflect upon Allah, your fadl and your karam and your blessings. Allah, we ask that you give us all rizqan halalan tayyiban mubarakan fi. Allah, we ask you to allow us all to achieve and earn halal earnings so that we can nurture not only ourselves but our communities and our ummah at large. Allah, give us the tawfiq and ability to be amongst those people who earn for the sake of you, for the sake of your noble Habib alayhi salatu wasalam, and to give us the ability to be rich, not only in physical wealth, but in spiritual wealth, rich in our hearts, rich in our livelihoods, and rich in our communities. Ya Rabbil Alameen, enrich us with your love, enrich us with the love of your noble Habib alayhi salatu wasalam. Bijah Nabiyyika al-Mustafa al-Murtada, wa sallallahu ala Habibik Sayyidina Muhammad, وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وسلم عليه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. جزاكم الله خير. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
جزاك الله. السلام عليكم.
السلام ورحمة الله.